George, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Simon. Good morning. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
George, I've been reflecting a lot on this conversation, and there are three words, right? There's entrepreneur, there's addiction, and there's neuroscience. And you have your experience of life has brought all of those three things together in a single lifetime. And you could be one of those in all of a lifetime. It's, they're all big things. I wonder where the right place is to start with all of those. So what came first?
Yeah, well, you pretty much summarized my life right there. I guess we can call it a day. um, well, they were all intermingled, as you say. I think the story starts in childhood where, I had a privileged upbringing. I didn't really want for anything materially. My parents, my dad was a corporate climber, so became very successful over the years. But as a result of that, we moved every 12 to 18 months. And so I was constantly in and out of environments, having to leave environments, find my way into new ones, meet new friends, say goodbye to friends. And that kind of affected me in a negative way. It became very difficult to form relationships, have close relationships. The patterns were developed where I knew that I would be leaving. And so I never really attached to anyone. It also made me uncomfortable in my own skin because I was constantly having to be in uncomfortable environments. You put on top of that the fact that my parents were from the generation that, disciplined their kids heavily. There was a lot of physical discipline, and that affected me psychologically. I just wasn't sure of who I was and that it was okay to be who I was. There was some sexual abuse from some older boys when I was a young kid. And then my parents moved to Australia when I was in ninth grade. And we decided I would stay here in boarding school to try to get into college from here. And so I was kind of fending for myself from ninth grade on, in a sense. I went home once a year to see my family, but outside of that, it was pretty much, fending for myself. So that laid the framework for me being fairly uncomfortable in my own skin. I went to college, and by the way, I had a lot of addiction in my family. The entire side of my mom's family were addicts, alcoholics. And so, I met some friends in college, and of course, there was a lot of partying in college, and first time I had ever partied. And amazingly, the substances just made it all get better. All my mental anguish and anxiety and torment kind of quieted when I was using substances. And I said, well, this is pretty good. And so that really started a path of coping with mental discomfort for the better part of 30 some years, all through my, early and mid adulthood. While I was working, I was a high functioning professional, but still coping with substances. And then I became an entrepreneur at the age of 30. I started off in the hotel industry, rose the ranks there, and then decided at the age of 30 it wasn't my calling. I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to determine my own destiny. I think a lot of that had to do with how I was raised, the fact that I was so independent and had to fend for myself. It just kind of goes along with being an entrepreneur. And so that was my life, mentally uncomfortable, a lot of behavioral issues underneath the addiction, a lot of anger, a lot of defensiveness, constantly feeling like I was under threat. I was intense, had to prove myself, results. And so, and I was stressed out, just constantly on alert. My nervous system was just activated all the time. And so you put that underlying state, and then becoming an entrepreneur on top of that, which is a high stress pursuit, and it just gasoline on the fire. And so that was my life for 30 years until the early 50s, when the addiction became so bad that I just was out of control. I just couldn't control it anymore. It went from compulsive to impulsive. I just couldn't stop. And so I had to get help. And that's when I hit bottom, and that's when things started to turn around.
You covered a lot of ground there in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's all right. It's great. It's great because we are talking about such significant topics here. We talked about, entrepreneurialism. We've talked about, a journey into addiction. And then we've talked about, what we will talk about into the future is kind of, in the conversation is going to be around neuroscience. And it's so interesting the journey you've been on because it's going to be similar to a lot of people where they've, maybe they've encountered something in their childhood. I'm so sorry to hear you mentioned sexual abuse there. I mean, that must have been horrendous to live through, and also then to reflect on that as an adult as well. I wonder would you say that's one of the main place of trauma for your child upbringing, or do you think it was broader than that?
I really think it goes more to my relationship with my parents. Because I was moving so much, I didn't have a lot of close friends. So it was all about my relationship with my parents, and I idolized them. I mean, I thought they were the best. So even in amongst some of the treatment I received in terms of discipline, I just always recognized they had my better interest at heart. They were doing the best they could. It was a sign of the times. It's how they were taught to parent. So I think that was really, it wasn't really the physical harm. It was the psychological harm of not living up to their expectations. That was everything to me. My dad was a high achiever. I just admired him so much. I wanted to be like him. And so when that figure, that main attachment figure, is telling you through your actions that you're not measuring up, the psychological impact of that is significant. So that feels to me like the biggest traumatizing experience, because I've just grown up not feeling good enough.
Yeah, I read a book by Marissa Peer. She might know she's quite famous in the US as a hypnotherapist and psychologist. And her book was called "I'm Not Enough." And the whole book was the premise of it, or all the people she treated for her entire life. She said she simplified it, and she treated thousands and thousands of people. And during that time, she said it comes back to something really simple, which was we just don't feel enough. We just don't feel enough. I don't feel enough. And a lot of that comes down to your relationship with your parents, and as males, often with our dads. And it's because maybe they didn't say particular words. I love you. I care. I'm proud. I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. It just, my audio kicked out. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's all right. We can,
Patch it together or?
oh, that's fine. Yes, no problem. I'll
Right.
take it offline. I'll patch it together. It's no problem.
Okay. Sorry about that. Sometimes with Riverside, it just, whatever kicks out. I don't know why, but
Oh,
anyway.
okay. It's all right. Okay. So I'll go from there. So, the Marissa Peer book, she talks about, thousands of clients when she distills it down to, a single sentence, and she tries to describe what it is. What is it people are feeling? It's that I'm not enough. I certainly felt that. And it sounds like that's something you've exactly explained in that instance. And quite often that goes back to, as males, goes back to our relationship with our dads. And in your instance, you're sharing that it's because he was a high achiever and you didn't live up to his expectations. What was the impact of that for you? Because that feels like you said that there was a significant psychological impact. What was the impact? What happened next with that?
Yeah. Well, that was my interpretation from the environment, right? So that's, you know, I think I was enough for him, but that's not how I took it. And so that's really what the issue was. Because, we are a compilation of all of our past experiences, and those get imprinted into our brains, into neurological patterns, and they stick with us, and we continue to relive them, and they get stronger and stronger. So the impact was, and that's why these childhood experiences are so important, because they set the stage for our neurological mapping. They are the patterns that our brains develop initially. And if we keep reliving those experiences in various forms, it just strengthens like tree roots strengthen in our brains. And that's why they keep recurring and keep coming up for us in like circumstances. So for me, the impact was, okay, this imprinting had happened. I'm taking this with me, these patterns, this structuring with me, mental structuring, into adulthood. And now I'm living life, and I'm seeing current experiences at that time, which reminded me enough of the initial experiences in childhood that I felt like I was being attacked when I wasn't. And so anytime somebody would challenge me in a business environment or test my authority or something, I had to stand up for myself. And, I'm a fairly big guy. And so that intensity, and I was just also highly activated. So my nervous system was always, and we can talk about this in a little bit, how important regulating and conditioning of the nervous system is to healing. But I was always in sympathetic nervous system mode, meaning activated. My brain was looking for threats everywhere. And so anything that would even resemble a threat, I would take a cue from that, and my brain would respond in a way that says, protect yourself. And so that really, the issue was, behaviors that I would exhibit really affected my ability to relate well with people that I was working with, and it just caused various types of relationship problems. I could never get close to women. It was very surface oriented for me, no deep emotional connections. And that goes back to childhood, having never established deep connections with anyone. So these things just, carried with me and impacted me, as they do, everyone that has similar experiences.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, isn't it? When I was in my sort of late teens and 20s, I would get high as well. So I would drink, and I would take party drugs, recreational drugs. And I think my biggest reason for doing so was just that I just wanted to escape. It was just like I wanted a different experience. I wanted to escape. I wanted to, experience a different thing. And I do think that came down to sort of childhood. I've never really been able to put a finger on what it was, but it was just definitely this. I just needed this feeling, and I don't know why do you think you drank, or you got high, or what do you think that was? Trying to find a question in there. What do you think it was? I often think of it as just trying to feel free or escape.
Yeah, I get where you're going, and and I'm taking from that, what happens to us neurologically when we're in these places that are not comfortable, that we feel like we need to escape. And what it is we have thoughts and emotions that are really uncomfortable for us. And there's a certain network in the brain called the limbic network, where a lot of emotions are formed and processed. And, that network has a relationship with other parts of our brain, like the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, the rational, the impulse control. And they're supposed to have they're like the check and balance of each other. They're like what Congress and the executive branch is supposed to be, right? The problem is that these emotions that get so highly charged will send signals to the rest of the body saying we're under threat. And because the brain's number one job is to survive and to protect us from threats, it pulls all the resources from the brain into that network, and all of a sudden the prefrontal cortex goes offline. And so we can't even begin to, a lot of cases, think through this stuff, rationalize it, calm ourselves down, because our emotional center of our brain has control of us. Okay. And it's pulling cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine, from our glands in our body, and flooding our brain with these alert signals, stress signals. And it's uncomfortable, and it leads to stress, and it's just constant. And of course we want to escape. Why would we want to sit in that state? The brain is wired for, seeking reward, seeking pleasantness. And so it's telling us we're under threat. Let's find some reward. And so that's why we seek activities, substances, behaviors, whatever, that's going to deliver some dopamine to offset this influx of unpleasant neurotransmitting chemicals from our body.
Fascinating. Is this what they define when people say fight or flight?
Yep. That's exactly what it is. And that's what the sympathetic nervous system is all about. Or it's not what it's all about, but that's where we go when we're in that state, the fight or flight state. And it basically commandeers, takes number one priority. Nothing else matters to the brain except to protect you. And so really, if you think back to when, the humans were created, there were a few things that were very important. One were to eat so that we could survive, drink water so we could survive, have sex so that we could survive and, procreate the species, and then gather together in tribes, because all the dinosaurs out there, we didn't stand a very good chance of defeating them if we were by ourselves. So we grouped together in tribes to work together, protect each other. And from that, we derive a lot of pleasure from social relationships and falling in love and having a mate and all that. And so those are the basic things that the brain was wired to do, and derive pleasure from. And so when any of that is threatened, when our safety, our survival is threatened, nothing else matters to the brain. It'll pull all the resources to that particular task of protecting you, and everything else is put on hold.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm beginning to understand now kind of all of those things that have happened all of those years ago for you and also for me. Now you reflect upon some of those years. What's your view on those years that you went through when you were in fight or flight, and you were using substances, but you're also trying to grow a business at the same time? Like there's so much going on for you during those years.
Yeah. I've been asked, do I regret what happened? And I don't really spend a lot of time in the past doing that, because, and this is one of the main topics we may want to get into, is the conditions to change, become someone different, become that person that you want to be, not who you have been because of all these other circumstances. And so, you can't spend a lot of time regretting the past, living in the past, because that'll just keep these neural pathways that represent the unpleasant past activated and strengthened. The more that you relive these experiences, these are like roots in the ground from a tree. And if you keep reliving them, rethinking, re-emoting them, it's like pouring fertilizer on tree roots. They just get stronger and stronger and stronger, and you can't escape them. And so that's really the idea of change, is that you have to leave those experiences, shift out of them into new ones that are more pleasant and represent the way that you prefer to be and prefer to live your life, and to have the mental state that you would like. And so you're gradually shifting while you're not experiencing the old. Those pathways begin to get weaker and weaker and grow dormant. And then the experiences that you're now experiencing are forming, getting stronger. The more that you practice them, it's like fertilizer on those. And that's what transformation is you're tying into the deepest elements of our psyches and envisioning and practicing the life that you envision for yourself. And that will then begin to form these new neural pathways. They begin to strengthen as you practice them. You're leaving the old way of life behind. The issue is that it takes, weeks up to, a few months to fully begin to feel that transformation. And so the initial part of change can be hard because you're consciously having to work at it because it's new and different. The brain doesn't like new and different. It likes familiar because it knows what is familiar won't cause you to die. It doesn't know that whatever you're trying to take it into, it doesn't know that it's safe. And so it'll come a little bit kicking and dragging, but as you introduce new rewards from living that way, it'll say, wow, okay, this isn't so bad after all. And actually, I like it better than the old way because I feel better and safer. So yeah, I'll come along with you. But change takes motivation, commitment, and staying dedicated to the process of how the brain wants to change. The brain has very specific methods of how it wants to change. And that's what neurosciences coaches can help people do is diagram, plan out what this change needs to look like, and then help the client through it.
Incredible. Let's continue talking about that then, because when you realized, it's not even realized, you said you hit rock bottom. So therefore you were given no alternative almost to change. So what was that moment like? How did that manifest itself for you? And then start a new journey?
Yeah. And that's the hard part of this change that I think a lot of people experience is, what is going to cause you along the way? You know that things aren't going well. You're not happy. You've got these recurring uncomfortable thoughts and emotions happening, but you don't know that that's not normal. You don't know that there's a different way. You don't know how to get from point A to point B, and life is happening and you don't have the time. So what is going to be the catalyst to get this started? And that's where the rub comes. That's where the difficulty is, why a lot of people stay, quote unquote, stuck. And for me, I didn't have time for any of that. I didn't want to think about it. All I wanted was to build a business, produce results, the heck with anything else. I was trying to achieve significance for myself the way I was defining it. And so I needed some heavy duty, walk into a wall type of consequences before I was going to be willing to change. And that's what it took for me. So 3 DUIs, a couple of accidents where people were in the car while I was, inebriated, all kinds of strained relationships, you name it, fortunately I didn't kill anybody. So, but at the end I was taking 50 pain pills a day and drinking 2 bottles of vodka, and I just was miserable. Every couple hours I had to consume more substances to keep from withdrawing. So for me and for many people, it takes some serious consequences before they see no other way out. And then they're willing to do whatever it takes. For the people that can do it sooner, my hat's off to them, because, we don't have to get to that point where we're threatening our lives and somebody else's before, we can change, but it takes a lot of gumption to be able to do that.
What was the first step for you in changing?
So I remember sitting in rehab. I went to 3 different rehabs over a period of about 9 months as I was hitting bottom. And I asked myself, how the hell did I get here? Like, I'm 50 years old and this is who I am. This is, that's how I felt. And I'm in this, small room withdrawing and with a bunch of other people that were suffering. And I'm like, wow, this is where I am, where I've ended up. And is this going to be all that my life represents? And that was a serious question. I had some, look in a mirror and really self-reflect on what had happened and did I want to change? Did I want something different? Did I have the energy to do so? Unfortunately, I did. I didn't know what that looked like. In rehab, they bring in speakers to come speak to you that have been in recovery for a while, and you see their bright eyes and you hear about how wonderful life is. And, they're 8, 10, 12 plus years into sobriety and recovery and everything's wonderful. And you don't know whether to believe it or not, or how they even got there. But you know that you have no other, it's like a mouse in a maze that has tried to make all the different turns left and right, trying to find a different way to still operate their life and use. And they've reached the end of the maze and they're in this little room and they have no way out. So that's who I was. And my wife had left me, my puppies had left me. I was all alone and there was nothing left. And I just, that was the only choice that I had. And so I began the process of keeping my mouth shut and just taking all the advice I could get, and slowly walking on the path of recovery, which has now led me into neuroscience coaching and helping other people.
It's an incredible journey. I mean, in that moment where you're thinking, I bet you feel, I'm just trying to fun and kind of get to try and live in the moment with you for a moment just there. You're thinking, I'm 50, and you're sort of looking up and go look at your past life and think, how did this happen? And then you're also thinking, the steps to get into a life, which, you're seeing these speakers coming in who are 10 years sober, or they're 10 years telling you how great life is. I bet it feels like you're at the bottom of the biggest mountain in the world, and you're just looking forward and you're like, I haven't got a clue how to get there. Like, I know when I sort of went on a journey to reduce drinking, I was like, it's so entwined into everyday life. I think me and my wife had a glass of wine that turns into 2 glasses of wine, turns into a bottle, turns into a stressful day at work. Now we're drinking on a Tuesday. Then it's, it just slowly. It was never, the park bench type scenario of those things. It was just, oh, let's have a cheeky drink tonight. And then suddenly you've drunk every day for a month. And you're like, even at that level, it's like, it's hard to even see a way forward, which is there's going to be a life without this substance or these substances. And then, the knock-on effect of drinking turns into not very good food the next day, turns into more drinking, turns into terrible sleep. It's like you're in this horrendous cycle. And I remember really going, I've got no idea how to get out of this. Like, it just, what was going through your mind at those moments as you kind of looked up upon the mountain and thought, how?
Yeah, same thing. You just, you don't understand anything about what it's going to take, because, while you're progressing through the disease, that things aren't right. I know that a lot of people from the outside looking into an addict's world think, they're just having a great time. They don't care about anything. And, there's a lot of bad behavior that goes along with addiction, and I get why people see that. But it is a lonely, tormenting journey. The addict knows that they are going down a bad path. They're having to take more and more substances to get the same effect that they used to, called tolerance. Every time that they stop, they feel miserable. It's running their life. It's the most important thing in their life. They know that's not right. And oh, by the way, addiction is just a coping mechanism for really what's going on in that person's brain. So remember that people don't use and abuse drugs and behaviors just for the hell of it. They do it because they're uncomfortable in their minds. And so when you're an addict, you've got to not only stop using the substances or stop doing the behaviors, but then you've still got the underlying problems that you have to address. And so it's a double whammy. And that's where the kind of the challenge is to unpack each of those, because they're both challenges. And so it's not just stopping the drugs and alcohol, it's then figuring out what this other life looks like and how to get to it. And it's, unless you, have some training in it or understand that it can be done and how it does happen, and that it all comes back to the brain. It's a malfunctioning of the brain, all of these things. And so we have to then form a new lifestyle that will then over time completely rewire the brain, have the brain physiologically change. And I had no idea of any of these concepts, zero. And so I just became so fascinated with it that I began to do more and more research around it. And it, again, took me into the brain where all that change happens. And so I just, found that the more in depth involved I could get in my own recovery, the more I enjoyed it, the more I could understand the secrets of how it would be successful. And and I just can't get enough of it now. And it's made such a difference in my life. I just want to help others, achieve similar transformation.
I heard a wonderful statement recently, which was help who you were. Help who you were. And I feel like that's exactly what you're doing now. You've taken this experience of the last 50 years, and now you've learned how to solve the problem for yourself through research and neuroscience. And now you can help who you were, help people who are in similar situations to yourself.
That's exactly right. And hopefully help them before they end up where I did. Because there's a lot of people that die from addiction and before they ever can get help. And so, that's going to be the rest of my life. It's, it gives me so much energy and sense of accomplishment and sense of meaning and significance. Why would I want to do anything else, right? I mean, there's just nothing better than trying to help other people. I've never done anything in my life that even remotely comes close to the level of satisfaction I get than from working with someone and seeing the light come on for them. It is remarkable.
It's amazing. So one of the things that you talked about a few moments ago is something funny enough, I wrote about in my book, and I spent a bit of time trying to understand the concepts around it. And I actually think I heard somebody else on a podcast, Gabor Mate, I think, talking about it, because he was talking about addiction in the brain. And he was really clear in it's not about treating the alcohol or the substance. He said it's become a problem, but that isn't where the problem came from. So actually you've got to go behind that, which is, why is the person going for a drink or getting high in the first, or pornography, whatever the thing is, whatever, that can be any of those, could be shopping, could be gambling, could be any of those things. It's actually about treating the psychological problem that happened before that. So my interest I have in this question for you is that when you're coaching, you're working with somebody, how do you get to what is the actual problem, the underlying issues, and start to treat it and work with them on what that is? Or even, I can't even still put into words maybe the challenges that I'd had, because nothing severe ever happened to me as a child. But eventually I figured out it was something to do with my dad, but I can't tell exactly what. But like with you, so when you're working with someone, how do you get to kind of like the root cause or the root problem?
So what we try to do is really untangle and deconstruct these issues that are coming up for the individual. So, we just really try to dissect their life. When are they uncomfortable? What are the circumstances around that discomfort? So, and just follow me here. So every experience that we have, whether it's a thought, an emotion, or an action, any facet of mental life is constructed from a set of ingredients every single time. Okay. So in other words, when a thought emerges into our mind, I mean, I don't know if you've ever thought about, well, where did that thought come from? Well, where it's coming from is it's emerging from a set of ingredients. Picture yourself at your kitchen island with with 5 different ingredients: flour, eggs, sugar, and you're about to bake muffins. And there's 5 ingredients that the mind uses to create mental life each and every time it happens, all day, every day. And those ingredients are conceptual understanding, which is all of our past memories of everything that we've learned along the way. So it's like a reference book. Context, all the things that are happening right then and there in that environment, the time of day, the location, just all the detail. Sensory information, what the five senses are bringing into us, that information of what's occurring. Also our core affect, which is our body state. Are we in that moment? Are we feeling pleasant, unpleasant, highly activated, or not very activated? And the last thing is attention. Where are we placing our attention? Because our mind has all kinds of choices, all things going on. Where is it? So the mind is taking in that information from all of those five ingredients. And then what happens is it makes a prediction about how you should think, feel, or act in that situation based on experiences like that you've had in the past. Okay, so given that, if you're experiencing things that are unpleasant, that are not what you want to experience, your brain is predicting those feelings or thoughts based on these set of ingredients that are really the byproduct of past experiences. Okay. And so we try to dissect those uncomfortable experiences that you're having and reference them against where these things might have come from in the past. And so we really try to spend a lot of time deconstructing the experiences, understanding, well, what was like it in your past that your brain is replicating right now. And so if we can get back to those experiences, deconstruct them, make sense of them as to why they're reoccurring now, it really has an illuminating effect for the individual. And then we can say, okay, that isn't working for us. How would we like these experiences to go down? And so then we begin to paint a picture of who this person wants to be. Like if they could create two people, Simon of the past and Simon of the future, and begin to really envision how Simon of the future wants to live, how he wants his mental state to, how he wants his thoughts and feelings to go, how he wants to interact with other people, just everything that would represent his life, all the underlying values that are attached to that, his belief system, his identity, his psychological needs. And then we just sit there and we have the individual really experience Simon of the future and really fall in love with that person and really begin to establish an emotional connection to that person, a lot of reward associated with it. Because remember, the brain loves reward. And if we want to get Simon of the past to go to Simon of the future, the brain has to experience some reward from Simon of the future. And so we have this image and this detailed vision of who that is. And then we say, okay, let's start constructing some new experiences that represent how Simon of the future would like these experiences to be. And we lay those out and then we begin to practice them. And so by virtue, and we structure your days and your weeks so that it's built around Simon of the future. And so as he begins to, day by day, with his coaching process, begins to live the life of Simon of the future, he begins to transition these mental experiences away from Simon of the past into how Simon of the future would like to have these things happen. And then those patterns from the past that are hard to get away from, because he's not experiencing them anymore, they begin to weaken and go dormant because there's no neurotransmission going through them anymore. They're not being used. And so they're just kind of dying off slowly. They may still be there, especially if they're very prominent, have been prominent in his life, but they're just quieter because they're not being used anymore. And so over a period of weeks and months, as we enact and practice being Simon of the future, the brain's neurons are actually moving around and creating new patterns that represent all of these activities and representations of Simon of the future until before he knows it, he's, 12 weeks down the road. And he's like, wow, I'm beginning to see the difference. I feel different. The things from the past don't come up anymore. I really feel better. My brain is now on board because it's seeing all this reward from feeling better. I'm getting all this internal goodness. I'm getting serotonin and endorphins released from feeling so much better about myself. The brain loves that because it loves reward. And so the brain wants to keep doing more of it. And that's what lifestyle change looks like, is it's a gradual shift that becomes habitual to the point where we're no longer having to work at these things. They have now moved from the front part of our brain where we have to consciously work at them, and they move to the back part of our brain into our subconscious and become autonomic, kind of like riding a bike, brushing your teeth, you name it. You've shifted, and it happened before your eyes. You can't put a day on it when it happened. It's a gradual shift as we practice more and more. And so that's where coaching is we try to unpack the past, but then reconstruct what the future is going to be different than the past. So we work in the present. We touch on the past, but then we spend a lot of time moving forward, staying in action, shifting, transforming.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating because what you're talking about is using the conscious brain to then create new imprints for the subconscious brain. And I heard again on this podcast with Gabor Mate, I think it was, which was 95% of our operating system is the subconscious brain, not the conscious brain. So it's only the conscious brain that is just literally using 5% of what we're conscious or aware of. So therefore, what you're saying here is that by really going through the uncomfortable pieces of doing these new things, these new behaviors, these new actions, whatever they may be, I think of it as almost creating evidence of you being this new person. Let's just say maybe it's a diet. You start eating salads at lunchtime, or you're eating steak in the evenings, or you're eating a more healthy breakfast. It's like you're giving yourself evidence that this is who you are now. This is who you are now. And after a period of time, that becomes an imprint, and therefore it becomes a belief. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. So let's take your analogy of eating better. So let's say you're eating crappy food full of sugar and salt and things that the brain believes that it loves, right? And food manufacturers design things this way because they release dopamine in the brain. They give the brain reward, and they give it these short bursts of pleasure. Okay. So when we start to shift out of that, eating healthier things, it's uncomfortable because the brain doesn't derive any reward yet. It has to find the reward associated with that shift. And so if you're going to move away from sugar and salt, you're no longer giving it the dopamine. You have to associate new and different reward with eating better. Well, what are the things that we can associate that are rewarding with eating better? Well, our body feels better. We have more energy. We sleep better at night. We start to function better. Our brain operates better. We might lose some weight. We might be, we have less inflammation. I mean, so there's all kinds of things that we can associate with eating better, but we have to the brain has to have time, which is why the conscious mind has to be involved to keep us motivated and committed and pushing through. Little by little, the brain begins to experience this new reward that we have to constantly envision and remind the brain that here's the reward. And then, then after a few weeks, the brain becomes on board because then it now sees this new reward. This new reward is actually better than the old reward because it's longer lasting. Because these dopamine hits that we get from sugar, salt, nicotine, alcohol, you name it, are spike and come right back down. They don't last. And, but it's all the brain knows at that point. But as we shift, we get longer lasting feel-good chemicals like endorphins, serotonin, things that last longer, that, we're proud of ourselves. We feel accomplishment. This is the person we want to be. And so the brain begins to then say, okay, I'm going to shift out of this need for short, spiky dopamine into, other types of reward that make me feel good in a different way.
It's like an entire wellness package. isn't it? Because what you're talking about is, these dopamine or serotonin responses, which takes us to the top of the mountain really quickly. You have a beer or you have a glass of wine or you do a line, whatever it is that takes you to a higher, gets you high in some respects. And then there's always a crash, no matter what it is. But even if it's sugar, like there's always a crash. And that crash is, now how many people have ever had one chocolate? You open a box of chocolates, how often do you have one? Never, right? You always have two, three, 4, 5, 6. It's easier just not to have the first one. And for some people, that might be the same as alcohol or something else, because these are addictive. And then if you go a long period of time, it's so, I'd be interested to know kind of what the psychology is here, but your wellness, but it's not immediate. Over a longer time, your wellness improves. Like what's happening there when it's just, what's happening within ourselves? What's happening within our energy for our wellness or for us to feel better more often? I kind of touch on this a little bit in the book because I went all of last year without drinking, or a good period of last year without drinking, no sugar, no alcohol, no takeaways, those sorts of things. I just found my wellness just improved, which was I was just shocked actually how much better I was feeling. What's going on there?
Well, there's the physiological improvements. There's the metabolic improvements. All the physical systems that we have in our body begin to work better. Because remember that these substances are a product of what humans invented to cope. Naturally speaking, we're not meant to have these substances. If we were, then they wouldn't make us feel so bad. So that's what listening to your body is all about, right? If we just listen to what makes our body feel good over the long period, those are generally, safe places to go. So our systems are improving. And then the psychological effects, think about you eat a box of chocolates, you not only feel like crap from all the sugar, because of the dopamine spike and crash, but your body's inflamed from all the sugar. And then you feel the psychological effects of not being strong enough in your mind to not do what you just did. And, you think about that relationship of why you feel so bad after doing something like that. And it's because it runs contrary to your belief systems, who you want to be, your values. Do we really want to be that person that sits there and eats a box of chocolates? We'd really like to have total control over ourselves and be able to be that person we want to be. So we feel guilt. And that's unpleasant. And so, all kinds of things improve when we take a holistic approach to our well-being. It's not just diet, it's sleep, it's exercise, it's mindfulness, regulating the nervous system. And that's a big part of the coaching I do is we put a comprehensive plan together because the person has to feel great physically and mentally, psychologically for the brain to want to change. Can you imagine taking the brain through a process of change and discomfort if you're feeling uncomfortable otherwise because you're not running at peak performance? Right? It's like a car that needs to go in for a tune-up. You can't ask it to go across the country when it needs a tune-up badly, right? It's just not going to run well across the country. So we work a lot on nutrition and diet, sleep. You can really help your sleep patterns intentionally. Exercise, just a whole wellness package that gets this person primed and ready to go to undergo this type of transformation and change.
Fascinating. One of the things I think about often is stress. Like there's no way of getting away from it. It feels like it's everywhere. You go to work, it's a stressful situation. You go home, looking after children, stressful. This has happened, it's stressful. My wife's just had a baby. We've just had a baby. So that's, 8 weeks in, that can be stressful, beautiful, but stressful at the same time. And it's not just me. I mean, it's anyone you talk to. How are you doing? Oh, this has happened and that's happened and there's stress. And what is stress and why is it so present, and how can we find ways? What does neuroscience say about reducing stress?
So stress is a killer. It will cause cognitive decline. It creates a lot of, discomfort, as we know. It initiates and catalyzes a lot of bad behavior. And so what it is, it's a metabolic event. It's the brain recognizing a situation that's going to require resources. And so what it does is it signals, there's certain parts of networks in the brain that signal to the body, release these chemicals because I need resources to be able to deal with this situation. And so it pulls cortisol, it pulls adrenaline, a couple of other chemicals into the brain, floods it. And that's what you feel when you feel these stress symptoms, this rushing and warmness and energized, because your brain is detecting that you need to pull resources together to deal with a situation. And stress is often correlated with fight or flight response. And so your brain is detecting threats and in one form or another. And so, even if you don't think of it as like a life-threatening threat, if you really dissect some of these threats and why you might feel stressful, they really are threats in one form or another. And so you can actually reframe. And again, that stress response is triggered by thoughts and feelings. So if you take these instances, these experiences that are causing you stress, deconstruct them and say, well, let's really pick apart this experience that's happening, whether it's with my child or whatever. And is this really how the thoughts and feelings that I'm deriving from this are not pleasant? Is there another way for me to tweak these ingredients that remember, there's 5 different ingredients that form these thoughts and emotions. Can I reconstruct them, tweak them, a little less flour, a little more sugar, 1 extra egg, and make changes to this experience in a fundamental way so that I experience it differently? And then if you can start to experience something that had been stressful before in a different way by tweaking these ingredients, and you can get through it, and it's rewarding, and you keep experiencing it that way, then pretty soon your brain stops experiencing it the old way and experiences it in the new way. So I don't know if you're an athlete or a soccer player or a golfer, but if you're playing golf a certain way and it's not working out well and you're shooting a huge score, and then you take a lesson and the guy says, no, don't swing it this way, swing it that way. And you practice that new way enough times and you start getting better at it and it works out better and your brain detects reward from it, then pretty soon you're only swinging the new way because you've made it habitual and you're no longer swinging the old way. It's the same thing with our mental experiences, thoughts and emotions. So we can actually reconstruct these experiences that are giving us stress so that they're not stressful. That's number one. And then we can also work on nurturing and cultivating and conditioning our nervous system so that it's calmer to begin with, so that we're not as readily going to these stressful states. Those are things like eating better, sleeping better, exercising, which release stress, mindfulness in the morning. I have a 30-minute morning ritual, things like meditation, breathing, journaling, gratitude, which calm my nervous system and get me, and I talk to myself about the day that I'm not going to get stressed. Here's what I'm going to do at certain parts of the day. Here's what I'm going to eat. I have a plan. And so then you're lowering your nervous system. You're lowering the baseline of the nervous system. And then you also work on tools that when you are stressed, you know what to do immediately. You know how to take the steam out of stress, whether it's breathing, whether it's humming, whether it's singing, things you can do at the moment to cause that stress response to come down.
I love that. I love that answer. Thank you so much. Because I think the detail in that has really been helpful, because you've also shared, it's almost like you're talking about things that people can do proactively, which will help reduce stress almost before it occurs. I'm thinking about, like, let's just say there's a stressful situation that you go to each week. Maybe it's a meeting with your boss, or maybe there's an incident at work, which is reoccurringly stressful. I think what you're talking about there is that you can sort of proactively prepare for that event. So therefore it would ultimately become less stressful. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Yeah. So anything that you want to become good at, you have to practice, whether it's an athletic endeavor, a musical instrument, learning a language, job skills, etc. You don't expect that you're not going to have to practice to be better at it. Same thing with the partnership with our brain and mind, is that, I think we just believe that we're just going to automatically be good at these things without any practice. And that's the way I was, is I just figured, well, my brain was what it was. There's nothing I can do about it. I didn't even know that I could change it or practice to have it be better or different. And so, of course, if we're not getting good results, but we're not changing anything and we're not practicing that change, then of course we're not going to get better at it. Because all of these things that we do practice, instruments, athletic events, those are all in the brain as well. So those activities are embedded in the brain in the form of neural pathways, the same way as better thoughts and emotions and other actions are. So if we want to get better at how we're thinking, feeling, and acting, and avoid stress, we can actually proactively work on avoiding stress, then we have to practice that. So yeah, that's all part of becoming the new version of Simon, is we figure out how to have him be the best version of himself that he can be, mind, body, and soul, first, as a foundation for all this other change that he wants to occur to himself. So it's a better diet plan, it's better sleep, it's better exercise, it's morning rituals, it's proactively being able to calm his nervous system. And he works at it. He does it every day. The brain begins to get some reward from it, and it loves it. It transitions into a lifestyle. He starts to feel better physically, emotionally, psychologically. And then, then the brain is really willing at that point and able, because it's high functioning, to then take on some additional change, like deconstructing these experiences that are uncomfortable for him, giving him stress. And let's unpack that and figure out how to reconstruct it in a different way, so that when these situations arise, he does some things differently than he has in the past. And then we've diagrammed that, okay, well, if he does these things the new way, he won't incur stress the way that he did. Plus, he's already at a better baseline in terms of how he's operating. So you would be amazed at how much less stress you feel if you are conditioning your body to experience less stress.
Amazing. George, I've really loved our conversation today. I think that's been incredibly valuable. If anyone wants to sort of make contact with you, work with you, they want some advice and they want some support, got some guidance, what's the best way of getting in contact?
Please visit my website at georgehaymaker.com. That's HAYMAKER, georgehaymaker.com. And on there's a link for a 30-minute free discovery call where we can just kind of, kick our shoes off and just have a conversation about, what's going on with you, what's making you uncomfortable, and really dig into the detail and figure out, if we're a good fit to work together. And I just want to leave people with a note of encouragement that, change is possible. It's not only possible, it's doable. Science has proven it. Neuroscience has proven it. And all it takes is some motivation and commitment on your part, plus know-how of how to transition from one state to another. So if you're struggling out there, it is possible. And I encourage you to please, get help.
I love that. And I certainly echo that as well. If you're going through any challenging times, please reach out. Please reach out to George. Please reach out to someone, talk to someone. I know that certainly made a huge difference for me when I was going for a time where I needed to change. So yeah, I think that's always the first thing. I think the answer is connection and talking things through, and then figuring out a plan of action. So
Absolutely.
thank you, George. I appreciate your time today. It's been a really exceptional conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure, Simon. Thank you.